In a cave system in northern Spain, there's a shaft that drops 13 meters straight down into the dark. At the bottom of it, archaeologists found the remains of 28 separate people. No animals fell in. No river washed them there. They appear to have been put down there deliberately, and down there with them was one single object, a handaxe made of pink quartzite, carried in from a long way away. It's 430,000 years old. It might be the oldest thing a human ever left for the dead. Because here's what you have to understand first. Funerals are new, astonishingly new. Coffins, headstones, a ceremony with an order of service, all of that is the last few thousand years. Human beings and their close relatives have been around for well over 2 million. So what happened during all of that? For most of it, the honest answer is nothing happened. Somebody died and they stayed where they died, and the group moved on. That is what almost every animal does. Your dog doesn't hold a service. Neither do wolves or chimpanzees or anything else with a brain. Which is exactly why the pit in Spain is such a strange thing to find. The site is called Cima de los Huesos. It translates unhelpfully as the pit of bones. 28 individuals, men and women, adults and children, all in one place over a long stretch of time. These weren't even our species. They're much earlier. The ancestors of the Neanderthals, which means whatever they were doing it before our species existed at all. Now, archaeologists argue about this constantly, and they're right to. Maybe it was hygiene. Maybe it was keeping predators away from the camp. Those are real explanations. But then there's the axe. Pink quartzite, when everything else in the region is a dull grey flint. It's unused. It's beautiful. It's the only object in the entire pit. And somebody carried it a very long way. Nobody drops their best possession down a 13-meter hole by accident. Which brings us to the most famous story in this entire field, the flower burial. In the Shanidar caves in Iraq, an archaeologist found a Neanderthal surrounded by clumps of ancient pollen. Not scattered pollen, concentrated clumps from several flowering species. The conclusion was obvious and beautiful. Neanderthals had laid flowers on their dead 60,000 years ago. It rewrote everything. And then decades later, other researchers looked again, and it started falling apart. There's a rodent in that region, the Persian Jerd, that stockpiles seeds and flower heads in burrows. Its burrows run right through the site, which is a much duller explanation, and probably the correct one. I'm telling you this because I don't want to sell you a fairy tale. But here's the twist. Recent excavation at that same site found something else entirely. Individuals placed in the same specific spot, against the same rock, across generations. That part holds up. So put the flowers aside. The stronger evidence is much simpler. It's the things left behind. At two caves in Israel, Kafze and Skul, there are burials around 100,000 years old. One young person was placed with the antlers of a large deer held across the chest, another with the jawbone of a wild boar. These are not things that fall into a hole on their own, and they raise the question this whole video is really about. Why would you do that? The dead person cannot use antlers. They cannot eat. They are not going anywhere. Giving away a good tool in a world of almost no tools is genuinely expensive, so the only reason to do it is if you believe the object is still needed, somewhere, by someone, which means that by 100,000 years ago, people had started imagining an after. That's not a burial practice, that's a whole belief system showing up in the dirt. And then, about 34,000 years ago, in Russia, it escalates enormously. The site is Sungir. Two children were placed head to head and covered in beads, not a few beads, roughly 10,000 of them, each carved by hand from mammoth ivory. Experimental archaeologists tried making them. The estimate runs into thousands of hours of work, thousands of hours, in an ice age, spent on something that would be immediately covered in earth. There is no practical reading of that. None. It is pure meaning and nothing else. But burial was never the only option, and I don't want to give you a tidy story. Some groups left their dead out in the open, deliberately, until only the bones remained. Then they collected the bones and did something with those, which is its own kind of care. At Çatalhöyük in Turkey, people buried their dead directly underneath the floors of their own houses. You slept above your grandmother every night for your whole life. At other sites, skulls were removed, kept, and in some cases, carefully plastered over and painted. And in Australia, at Lake Mungo, someone was cremated 40,000 years ago, and the bones then crushed and buried. Every single one of these takes effort. That's the pattern, not the method, the effort. So, why? Here's the thing that took me a while to sit with properly. None of this helps the dead. Not one bit of it. The dead are entirely beyond helping. All of it is for the people still standing around the hole. Because at some point, in some skull, a genuinely terrible idea arrived for the first time. This happens to everyone, including me. And every grave dug since is a response to that. We didn't invent funerals for the dead. We invented them because we found out.